The first element we're going to think about is air. You'll notice I've already lit an incense stick, partly because it shows you the direction of the air, but also because we're going to think in terms of the scent filling the air in the following story from chapter 12 of John's Gospel. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he'd raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those at the table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept the common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." When the great crowd of the Jews learned that he was there, they came not only because of Jesus, but also to see Lazarus, whom he'd raised from the dead. So the chief priests planned to put Lazarus to death as well, since it was on account of him that many of the Jews were deserting and were believing in Jesus. The element air has, in modern circles, come to be associated with the power of the mind, of logical thought and deduction. When I've done some thinking about this with friends, we've decided that I am, if you like, an air person, which, given my former occupation as a scientist, comes as no great surprise to anybody. What then does this have to do with the story of Mary anointing the feet of Jesus? I think it's because she subverts the air narrative entirely and points us in a different direction, one which the church needs to heed, one which we all need to heed if we're to escape the feelings of guilt surrounding our passionate outpourings so long disapproved of by an Anglican liturgy. To understand this theme, you need to cast your mind back just over a week to the story of the raising of Lazarus, one which you can find in an earlier video. And you need to put yourself in Mary's shoes. She had Jesus return to her that most precious thing, a deeply loved sibling. A number of people have commented that our enforced isolation from each other has, for some people, reinforced the importance of the families. For Mary, Lazarus was her brother. Given the difference in nature between Mary and Martha, her sister, the emotional one and the pragmatic one, my suspicion is that Lazarus may have been the peace broker, the glue that held them together. His death could have spelt the death of their family. His return changed Mary utterly and totally. Have you ever experienced something like that? When someone does something for you that is so unselfish, so giving of themselves to provide something important to you that you can't stop thanking them. That's how it was for Mary, only more so. You may remember that I said a few videos back that I thought Mary, Martha and Lazarus may have been from a wealthy family, and that's borne out by what happens next. The estimate that Judas makes of 300 denarii is important, because a denarius was a day's wages. So 300 of them, that's getting on for a year's wages. What's that in today's money? Maybe something like £18,000, maybe a lot more depending on what you do for a living. Do we feel that kind of love and gratitude towards Jesus? Mary did. And she took that unbelievably expensive nard perfume and she pours it over the feet of Jesus as a passionate response of gratitude. The air is filled with the smell of that perfume. It would have been overpowering as the scent filled every part of the house. No one would ever forget this moment. And then Mary lets down her hair, an extremely unseemly thing for a woman to have done in Jewish society, and she uses it to wipe his feet. This was a wild, crazy, deeply passionate and human response to the love and mercy shown to her brother, and therefore to her. and Jesus inhabits her wildness. Jesus endorses it when he's opposed by Judas, or when she is told off by Judas. Leave her alone, he says. What does it say to us, I wonder? Well, I know what it says to me, and maybe you'll find the same thing. The element air, that logical, deductive thinking, is how so much of the established church down the ages has operated. So much of what we believe in our doctrine comes from logical and philosophical deduction. And who is that associated with in this passage? Judas. Judas is the one who makes the logical response that the perfume could have been sold and the proceeds given to the poor. That would have been the logical thing to do. But Mary wasn't being logical. Mary was being wildly passionate in her expression of gratitude. I know that I can learn a lot from that. I believe that God gave me a gift of being able to think in a particular way, to enable me to do this kind of thing. But occasionally the Spirit reminds me of Mary and the need to let down my hair, at least what little there is left of it, for a wild and passionate expression of love for what Christ is doing in me. Maybe you feel the same way. For generations, the established church, dominated by men who try to control their emotions and replace them with logical thinking, has frowned on this kind of behaviour. Maybe it's time we learned from Mary and let her subvert the air element, filling it with the passionate scent of devotion that fills our homes.